Reading now from the Gospel of Jesus Christ according to John, chapter 15, and I'm going to read the first 8 verses. If you'd like to read along, you can find this on page 146 in the New Testament. I am the real vine, and my Father is the gardener. He breaks off every branch in me that does not bear fruit, and he prunes every branch that does not bear fruit so that it will be clean and bear more fruit. You have been made clean already by the teaching I have given you. Remain united to me, and I will remain united to you. A branch cannot bear fruit by itself. It can only do so if it remains in the vine. In the same way, you cannot bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, and you are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will bear much fruit, for you can do nothing without me. Those who do not remain in me are thrown out like a branch and dry up. Such branches are gathered up and thrown into the fire, where they are burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, then you will ask for anything you wish, and you shall have it. My Father's glory is shown by you bearing much fruit, and in this way you become my disciples. Well, we know what vines are. After all, we live in wine country, don't we? We know that a vine grower or vine dresser is needed to keep the vines in order. Because left alone, these thick trailing plants will grow uncontrollably and result in one big tangled mess. The passage I just read is a perfect metaphor that Jesus uses to talk about what it means to be a member of the Christian church and to bear good fruit in his name. God is the vine grower, Jesus is the vine, and we are the branches. And as branches, we are called to abide in Jesus, to remain attached to Jesus the vine, to stay in place, to endure, to hang in there, and eventually bear good fruit. Now, I find it interesting that many ministers, priests, and pastors seem deeply hurt when members of their congregation transfer to other congregations, particularly when such transfers have nothing to do with a job transfer or a move to be closer to family or any other such thing. As the metaphor goes, these ministers feel hurt when the branches in their congregation decide to attach themselves elsewhere on the vine. If, in the case of vines, this at all was possible. Now, I've never had that problem myself. To the contrary, my prayer has always been that people find their own best place to worship God. A place where they can feel most connected, most in union with God. But it is funny that most people in North America, and I suppose other parts of the world too, are used to living in what I call voluntary societies. Societies where we view our membership and involvement in institutions, in clubs, in any sort of group, as something that is entirely up to us. As individuals in our society, we can initiate and terminate membership at will. We tend to view membership, I think, or belonging to any sort of group, at arm's length. In some ways, being a voluntary member carries with it a vague sense of detachment. I come and go as I please. Thank you very much. I can join the soccer team one year, quit, play football the next, regardless of how it may affect my buddies on the soccer team. I can even join the cheerleaders and the drama club at the same time. Try them both out, see which one I like, then decide, make my choice, knowing all the while that I only had time for one. Why, I can church shop, I can even church stop. If I don't like what a preacher or anyone else in the church is telling me, I can go to another. Or worse yet, I can stop going to church altogether. On and off the vine as we see fit. Right? It's as simple as that. That's how we think. And we think that's okay. But it's not okay. At least not according to the Bible. When I say I am a member of Harrow United Church, biblically speaking, it's like referring to my own hand as being a member of my own body. That's a huge difference in thinking. Being a voluntary member of some group means that joining and quitting the group are rather easy. But being a body part, however, is not the same. A hand can't quit the body without some pretty dramatic effects. Or in the case of our gospel passage, a branch cannot leave the vine without some trauma involved. Trauma may be on the part of the branch, but certainly on the part of the vine. In this case, Jesus, who suffers every time God is forced to cut off a branch. But therein lies the dilemma. We know that unfortunately some hearts do close. We know this. Some branches become faith empty and unproductive until finally their own desire is to remove themselves from the vine. And whether these branches really intended this or not, finally God must cut them away from the vine. Not without coaxing, not without a lot of care, not without a lot of love mixed in with a heavy dose of sorrow. But ultimately, for the good of the vine, it's something that God, the vine grower, must do. And what is so painful is that the branches that have been cut away are described as having been once in Jesus. In other words, the soon-to-be dead wood once had every bit as intimate a relationship with Jesus as every other branch. It's not as though these branches once floated above or below the vine, or had perhaps just a tiny little connection. A branch is a branch, and is by its very nature intimately and organically united to the vine. And so in the case of Jesus, to lose a branch is to lose a part of himself. The act of God cutting off a branch from the vine is a wounding, scar-making, traumatic event. And small wonder that Jesus begs his disciples not to let this happen. Jesus is desperate that everyone remain in his love, that everyone hang in there as he himself remains in the hearts of all his branches. But enough about church membership and our propensity perhaps to take it a little bit too casually. What we need to remember, though, because our spiritual health, I believe, depends on it, is that as branches we are called to abide in Jesus. And I've said this before, to remain attached to Jesus, to stay in place, to endure, to hang in there, and eventually to bear much good fruit. But here's a paradox for you. The paradox is that God must cut away the lifeless, unproductive branches from the vine and prune those branches that are productive. At some point, all the branches need to be cut. Young branches are not allowed to bear fruit for the first 2 years. Which means that a drastic pruning is needed each and every season so that the plant can develop to its fullest. Right? So vineyards then are long-term investments and very labor intensive. And God knows it. So here are a few questions you may wish to ponder as you abide in Jesus as a branch to a vine. Think of this. What differentiates an unproductive branch from a productive one? In other words, what constitutes good fruit? What is good fruit? What does that mean? And how is it that some people manage to abide in Jesus while others fail to do so? And finally, what does a person of faith look like? What does he or she look like? Is the faith-filled person someone who projects a certain serenity? Right? Who walks with a calm and hushed and unperturbed spirit? Or is the faith-filled person the active, always in motion kingdom worker who is mostly kind of a holy blur of volunteerism? Is faith a set of convictions or beliefs that can be cross-stitched onto a piece of fabric and then hung on a wall? Is that faith? Or is faith seen best only when it's put into practice on the nitty-gritty streets in the real world? I want you to consider this. In the Bible, Abraham is claimed to be the father of all faith. And his life was mostly a series of journeys that involved trust. By faith, Abraham packed up everything he owned one day and set off on a long trip toward an as yet unspecified distant country. God said, "Go," and Abraham went. God said, "Go to a place that I will show you later on." Abraham didn't reply, "Well, if I'm going to go, could you at least give me a hint? A general direction? Right? A region on the map?" No. He just went. No map. No end destination. Just a wing and a prayer. A dream of starry skies and sandy seashores. A home country out there somewhere. That's a leap of faith, we say. Right? And most of us, I believe, do believe that at some level, sooner or later, we'll all be called to a leap of faith. Now, Abraham's own journey of faith had its ups and downs and its setbacks. But his story climaxes with one final excursion into the unknown, when God told him one day to take his son, his only son, Isaac, whom he dearly loved, and kill him at a place that God would show Abraham later on. And he set out. And it was only when the dagger, when the knife, glistening in the morning sun, was raised up over Isaac's heavy beating chest, that God said, "Now I know. Now I know." Abraham's journey of faith was complete. Once again, Abraham had leapt into the unknown and had proved his faith to God. "Now I know," God said. Frederick Buechner has written that faith should be seen as a verb and not a noun. Much like I said last week when I was talking about love. He says this because faith is always about one's sacred journey along life's many, many varied pathways. It's always a journey. Right? Others point out that in the Greek, in the New Testament, people are not said to believe in something, but rather they believe into something. There's a difference in that little preposition. Because it again hints at movement. Right? And the risky business of stepping out into thin air. That's faith. To people such as these, faith is never a creed. Because creeds are too static. They're too settled. Creeds make faith look like a big, overstuffed easy chair that you can settle into in your living room in a kind of cozy spiritual serenity. But real faith, some say, is about hitting the road and trusting God to lead you along. For these people, faith is active and moving, not static and dry. It's an old debate. Martin Luther, whom we know as the father of Protestantism, had his life turned upside down. His whole world changed after he read and reread several times, I'm sure, the Apostle Paul's claim that we are justified by faith alone. Okay? Do we remember that from Sunday school? We are justified by faith alone. According to Paul, faith is a gift given to us by the grace of God. In other words, we don't have to do anything to get faith. But then Luther, along with others, rediscovered the letter of James. James was one of those people who didn't want faith to be an easy, overstuffed chair. And so he said over and over again that faith without works or faith without good fruit is dead. That's the debate. If you've got faith, James said, then you'd better be out there living and working and journeying along in very, very active ways. Well, Luther didn't like that at all. James makes me so angry, Luther said one day, that I feel like throwing Jimmy into the wood stove. Luther wanted faith to be like a precious jewel hidden in our hearts, while others claim that the best image for faith is walking. Some say faith is a matter of the head and the heart, what we think and what we feel. Others say it's a matter of the hands and the feet, what you do and where you go. So I guess I'll leave that up to you to decide where faith lies for you. But I'm here to say that in this morning's passage, we get a little of both. On the one hand, faith is about remaining and abiding, staying still and calm and in one place, hanging in there. It's about remaining faithfully attached to Jesus the vine. But at the same time, we're called to produce fruit, good works, to be active, to be vibrant, to be verdant. So what remains, I suppose, is the thought that there is a season for everything under heaven. A season for calm, a season for busyness, a season for spiritual serenity, and a season for action. All the while knowing that in every season, we grow to the fullest flower when we remain rooted in Christ's love. And may God bless and encourage every one of your faithful and faith-filled journeys. Amen.